In August of 2023, a militia group based in Ethiopia, known as the Fano Militia, started seizing villages, towns, and cities in the region known as the Amhara region. They even went to a point to capture an airport. They even infiltrated big cities like Gondor and Baha. But the Ethiopian federal government managed to push them back into the highlands where a new guerrilla war is taking root in Ethiopia. Now, when you take a closer look at the ethnic groups that you find in Ethiopia, right? It is a number of them. You find ethnic groups like the Tigrayans, right? You find ethnic groups like the Somalis, right? You find an ethnic group known as the Oromos, right? But in this particular video, we'll be focusing on a ethnic group that is basically known as the Amhara people. Now, when we look at the Amhara ethnic group, right, it is the second biggest ethnic group to exist in Ethiopia, right? Basically following the Oromo people. The Amhara people stand at about 28% of the total population of Ethiopians, right? Which brings them to a number of about 20 million. Now, the war between the Amhara people, right, and the government basically started around, I would say, April, right? April of 2023, with a huge protest that erupted against the Ethiopian federal government, right? There were a number of issues that were on the table, right? Number one, the Amhara people still wanted to preserve their military independence, right? Now, to understand Ethiopia and its politics, you must understand one basic thing about the Ethiopian military, the way it is organized, right? It is organized along ethnic lines, meaning each ethnic group, right, that I just spoke about has their own military and military equipment, right? Meaning the Tigrayans have their own military. The Somalis have their own military. The Oromos have their own military. And fundamentally here, we are speaking about the Amhara people fighting to preserve their own ethnic military, right? You can also add a certain level of self governance. They were also protesting the various arrests, kidnappings, and torture which the federalized Ethiopian government was conducting. The situation continued to heat up and boiled up to a point where the Amhara people, led by the Fano militia group, stormed into a number of police stations, releasing specifically Amhara prisoners and stealing weapons. And on the 4th of August 2023, the federal government basically called a state of emergency. On the 13th of August 2023, a government drone killed about 26 civilians. So, in summary, right, the boiling war, right, or the coming war is fundamentally about disarming Fano, right? Disarming the Amhara people, right? So this is what they are fighting. They don't want to be disarmed by the Ethiopian government and absorbed into the state. Now, when we keep our focus on the recent war which occurred in Ethiopia, known as the Tigrayan War, right? Fundamentally, the Tigrayan War, right, was about the government disarming the Tigrayans and absorbing them into the national government military, right? The war which occurred was basically about that, right? There was a peace deal, right, which was signed between the Tigrayans and the Ethiopian government, right? This peace deal was signed in South Africa, right? But by the time this peace deal was signed, the Amhara people, in the form of Fano, right, was already part of the war. Because when the Ethiopian government was fighting the Tigrayans in trying to disarm them, right, the Ethiopian government asked for help from the Amhara people, particularly the Fano militia, right? So the Ethiopian government requested assistance from the Fano government, the Fano militia, right? So the Fano militia and the government were fighting on one side against the Tigrayans. Now, the main reason the Fano militia, right, got involved in the war was because the Tigrayan war between the Tigrayans and the Ethiopian government spilled over into the Amhara region, particularly Western Tigray, right? They started killing people, the Tigrayans started killing people, right? And seizing portions of that land. Now, because the Ethiopian government was not really successful in defeating the Tigrayans, right? And the Amhara people were being harassed and killed, right? They came together as one force against the Tigrayans. Now, there were about a number of conditions, I think about two conditions in the peace deal between the Tigrayans and the Ethiopian government, right? The first one is that the Tigrayans will be disarmed and will be absorbed into the federal Ethiopian military, right? The second one is that the Tigrayans, right, made a request of Western Tigray, right, which was already taken by the Fano militia in the war, right? In order for them to have peace and accept this peace deal, the Fano militia must return the land back to the Tigrayans, right? That was another condition, right? Which automatically creates and starts a new war, which is the Ethiopian government must now, number one, disarm the Amhara people, right, in the form of Fano militia, must number one, disarm Fano militia and absorb them into the government military, right, and take the land and return it back to the Tigrayans. Now, this automatically sparks tensions between the Ethiopian federal government and the Fano militia, right? Which resulted in the number of events and occurrences which happened in 2023. Now, what makes the situation worse is that the Amhara people have a historical claim over Western Tigray. So you have all of this political strife, right, and confusion, right? And you have an ethnic element, right, added to it, right, where ethnic cleansings tend to occur. when we look deeper into the Tigrayan war, right, there's about 6 million Tigrayan people, right? So the Ethiopian federal government, military, was fighting a population of 6 million people, right? The Tigrayans are quite a well organized and well armed military group, right? So that's why the war took about 2 years to end. They were quite a formidable fighting group, right? It is known that the Tigrayans are the actual ethnic group to defeat the Italians who were trying to colonize them, right? So they defeated the Italians. So they are really good fighters, right? So they are good fighters and organized, and there's about 6 million of them, right? But this time, this coming war is against a much bigger ethnic group, right? Now, there is about 20 million Amhara people, right? They are not as organized, right? I would say they are a developing army, right? But what will make this war quite devastating is the numbers, right? So you will have more people dying and being part of the war than compared to the Tigrayans, right? Now, yes, Fano is really not an equipped or a well organized militia group, right? But the the Amhara region, right, is bordering Sudan. Are we okay? It's bordering Sudan. And as we all know, there is currently a war happening in Sudan, right? So, to improve their military skills, they can take a few generals, right, from Sudan to train the Amhara people and to suggest equipment that they can use in the war so that the Amhara people are more prepared for the coming war with the Ethiopian federal government.